Saga of the Beast. If there is one thing you learn of Ghazghkull Thraka, make it this. He is no ordinary orc. Among a relentless and savage Xenos species, mankind has underestimated on battlefield after battlefield. This abomination stands out. The depth of his brutality and his infernal cunning exceed that of any other greenskin encountered in millennia. The murderous carnage inflicted by his endless hordes draws billions more of his kind irresistibly to him. He is a virus that grows exponentially, gorging on violence, mayhem, and suffering. Worst of all, he knows his potential, and he strives to fulfill it. If he is successful, Ghazghkull will drown the galaxy in an ocean of green death, even as he roars his praise to his false, blasphemous deities. This must be destroyed. This filth must be purged. This foul presence cannot and will not be tolerated in the Emperor's realm. All must take up the sword to spill out his life force once and for all. If we wish the Imperium to survive, we have no choice. I declare it now, without hyperbole, that if Thraka is not stopped, mankind's extinction is imminent. The beast of Armageddon must be given no quarter. Wherever he dares tread, I will follow, with all the might the Emperor deigns to give me for this most important of tasks. And when the undertaking is done, when the so-called prophet of Gork and Mork's head is removed from his body, I will hold it in the palm of my claw and crush it forever. Commissar Sebastian Yarrick. From On the True and Absolute Peril of Ghazghkull Thraka. On 7 occasions did Dolph Thunderhowl risk life and limb for his brothers. On each event, luring the hidden Xenos foe out into the open to be slain. Great tallies did he add to the number he has felled. Long may his saga grow. A green tide threatens to engulf the galaxy. Gork's grin, as the Orks call the Great Rift, has brought boundless opportunities for furious battle, and the Greenskins are taking full advantage. The Imperium is vulnerable, beset by countless enemies on every front. Alive to the threat, the Space Wolves race to meet it head-on. Gork's grin shattered hundreds of Ork empires, driving billions of greenskins into freebooter warbands. The vast maw also vomited out demonic legions and fleets of renegade ships. Even as they fell upon the beleaguered worlds of the Imperium, these heretic forces found themselves assailed by ramshackle armadas of Ork vessels, or hordes of green hulking brutes spoiling for a fight. Ghazghkull Thraka, prophet of Gork and Mork, claims to have received a vision from his gods, commanding him to begin a war larger than any before. Now he conquers tribe after tribe to unite his savage race, even as huge Ork migrations cross the galaxy to join him. Though the Orks have prospered among the mayhem, recent years have been hard on the Space Wolves. Their home system of Fenris was stormed by Magnus the Red and his 1,000 sons, before the Cicatrix Maledictum emerged, and many of its worlds were devastated. Before the dust had even settled on Fenris, the Space Wolves leaped to Cadia's aid, as the fortress world was besieged by the ravaging forces of Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade. Many more Space Wolves died to protect that vital system before it fell. Now the Space Wolves' rune priests cast the runes and scour the skeins of fate, their readings and visions more alarming than any before. Their tortured dreams are full of green-fleshed trolls, which they know must be destroyed. True heroes of the Imperium, the Space Wolves fight on, regardless of cost. Torvald Greymane, pierce the orc's hide with his blade, even when trapped in its foul grip. So determined to slay the beast was he, that he threw himself into roaring flames, dragging the beast with him. Thus ends his saga. Devastation. Across the galaxy, the Orc menace rampages, ceaseless waves of muscled brutes, equipped with devastating weaponry and ramshackle but deadly vehicles that demolish all before them. The anarchy caused by the Great Rift has rendered the Greenskins' unpredictable onslaught even more dangerous than before. Few but the Space Wolves have sensed the true severity of the situation. As numberless orcs fought against the teeming hordes of demons and renegades spewing from Gork's Grin, the cleverest Greenskins concluded that if Chaos forces could leave the Great Warprent, then the orcs could certainly enter it. Grinning savagely at the prospect of being launched into all kinds of huge battles, countless Greenskins plunged their massive fleets into the Great Rift's roiling storms. Many were never seen again, swallowed by Gork's maw. Many more were spat out, however, into fights of a scale they never dreamed possible. Those few orcs astute enough to contemplate anything beside the greater potential for joyous violence felt Gork smile upon them, and fought all the harder. Orc attacks on the Imperium increased in frequency and intensity. Massive space hulks disgorged millions of brutish greenskins onto vulnerable worlds that had barely staved off the horrors of Chaos invasion. Imperial fleets fighting to navigate the turbulent empiric energies were caught by surprise and destroyed. Proud Imperial vessels saw their armoured flanks daubed with crude orcish glyphs and tribal colours. Many were completely transformed by their new owners. Some had great slabs of metal welded onto their already immense armoured panels, while others had vast cannon arrays fitted into every available space. Weird boys roamed among the Orc tribes in greater numbers than ever before, their eyes glowing green and their hands crackling with raw power as their visions inspired ceaseless raving. Where Orcs gathered, their Wa energy swelled to near impossible levels. More warpheads appeared among the Orcs, addicted to the constant surge of Wa energy and driven half mad by the weird images flickering through their minds. In battle, they vomited streams of green ectoplasm that could destroy fully armoured columns or smash breaches into mighty bastion walls. On some battlefields, entire Orc armies were teleported by their weird boys, vast hordes disappearing in a storm of Wa energy, only to materialise elsewhere. Believing himself the chosen vessel of Gork and Mork, Ghazghkull progressed his great Wa in earnest. Warlord after warlord submitted to his might or were crushed. Such power radiated from the growing carnage Ghazghkull wrought that greenskins were drawn in from hundreds of light years away, whether they came consciously or otherwise. Other tribes and warbands travelled from further afield, compelled by the insane ravings and impassioned diatribes of their weird boys. The galaxy's relentless turmoil put untold pressure on the Space Wolves' rune priests. Their minds were ravaged by visions of pain and death on an unimaginable scale. Some were terrible nightmares. Others were tangible prophecies of dire threats, corroborated by rune casting and battlefield intelligence. The great companies leaped from war to war based on these visions, quelling uprisings, slaying heretics, and slaughtering hideous monsters. Many glorious sagas were born and expanded, though many more were brought to a heroic end. Warriors sharpened their axes and blades at the thought of glories to come, worthy of song. A number of Space Wolves even hoped this might be the wolf time, and that Leman Russ would rejoin his sons soon. Many of the most disturbing visions that troubled the rune priests involved a great green pyre, spreading amid the stars. Viridian sparks and motes whirled around it, but rather than drifting away from the flames, they drew toward them. The rune priests discussed the meaning of these visions, and many came to a similar conclusion. The Orks were becoming more united. All agreed that this was dire news for an Imperium already at the edge of its capacity to resist the myriad threats that assailed it. The Space Wolves reached out to contacts within the Death Watch and Inquisition. When they learned of Ghazghkull Thraka's murderous warpath, the reality of the situation became all too clear. Somehow, a warlord powerful enough to unite the green-skin race had emerged. The sons of Russ began to muster allies at once, from those already fighting the Orc threat to those whose resolve was beyond question. First to be approached were the overstretched Death Watch of Keep Extremis, a Führer Shield, and the Onyx Patrol. Space Wolves returning from service with other watch stations brought grave tidings, however, telling of the multiple wars the Death Watch fought. It was clear that not even all the watch stations combined had the resources to challenge the relentless Orc threat, and that warriors pledged by other Space Marine chapters should be readily welcomed. Notable among these were the Dragon Spears, who upheld old oaths of brotherhood toward the Space Wolves, and the Night Raptors, whose hatred of the Orcs was incessant and deep-rooted. Logan Grimnar gathered the Wolf Lords of the chapter to discuss the escalating threat. The Space Wolves produced stellar charts showing the locations and movements of the greenskin hordes. They knew that, unless Ghazghkull Thraka were to be killed, the Great War would never be halted. But his location was unknown and could not be confirmed. That the warriors of Fenris could slow the greenskins' movements was more certain, however. Doing so would prevent great numbers of the Orcs from reaching Ghazghkull, and so protect worlds essential to the Imperial war effort, while the Space Wolves hunted down the Great Warlord. Grimnar tasked every Wolf Lord with providing warriors to fight, dispatching the great companies to widespread locations afflicted by the Orcs. All nodded their assent, their faces grim, and set immediately to work. Helgar Ensem, his leg hewn by a hulking Orc knob, held off countless brutes with relentless bolter fire. The greenskins eventually fell upon him, and he was cut down, but he died as a sky warrior should. So does his saga end. Revenge for Kaiba. The rune priests were unanimous. The Scar-Skell subsector was a locus for multiple Orc migrations, its stars reverberating with pulsating green energy in their visions. The sons of Morkai and the Blackmanes all made haste, determined to eradicate the greenskin menace from the region. Eric Morkai's great company and a strike force of Blackmanes reached the mountainous jungle world of Kaibal after a long toil through the warp. The planet was home to the Obsidian Jaguars chapter, noble warriors who were stout of heart and strong of arm. Morkai had fought alongside them before, and knew they would be valuable allies. But Kaibal had fallen to Goth Orks, and the Space Wolves found its orbit strewn with the wrecks of Adeptus Astartes warships, liveried in the deep sable of the Obsidian Jaguars. Morkai desired vengeance. He knew the Space Wolves could not retake the world with their few warriors, but resolved to strike hard, reasoning that the Obsidian Jaguars' gene seed stores might still be intact. The Blackmanes and the bulk of Morkai's gunships and armour would distract the Orcs, drawing the brutes away from the Obsidian Jaguars' fortress monastery, the Saber. At the same time, the sons of Morkai would infiltrate the bastion, extract any remaining gene seed and destroy its generatorium. The resulting detonation would not only deny the structure to the enemy, but also hurl debris for miles in all directions, annihilating those orcs not killed by the initial blast. The Blackmane's drop pods slammed into Kaibal's surface, scant miles from the great ebon edifice of the Sabre. They seized high ground above the steaming jungles as Thunderhawks landed the Sons of Morkai's battle tanks. Gunships zoomed overhead, strafing all camps with torrents of punishing fire and baiting the savage greenskins toward the awaiting Blackmanes. But the Orc numbers were great, and the Blackmanes were soon beset by thousands and driven further up the rocky slopes. Meanwhile, Goth tank busters fired hails of rockets into the air, blasting many Space Wolves' gunships out of the sky. As the battle raged, Eric Morkai and several packs of Wolf Scouts, Infiltrators, and Incursors slipped into the Sabre through service and refuse tunnels. They cut down any Xenos they came across with well-aimed bolter fire and knife thrusts, hiding the bodies to ensure that the mission was not undone by their premature discovery. Morkai and his warriors made for their targets swiftly. One detachment tasked to the Generatorium, another to the Gene Seed vaults. The Orcs had desecrated the Sabre's hallowed halls and passageways. Crude graffiti was daubed on the walls. Piles of refuse and discarded trinkets befouled every corner. Artifacts of stone, turquoise and gold, dating from throughout the Obsidian Jaguar's history, lay smashed on the ground. Though time was against them, the Space Wolves carefully took down the bodies of Space Marines who had been nailed to the walls and hacked to death. Morkai's desire for revenge burned even stronger. The Orcs would pay for their crimes. Despite the Space Wolves' best efforts, the running battles they fought with Orc mobs heading to fight the Blackmanes made their discovery inevitable. Bestial roars filled the halls. Wall-mounted weapons shook as Orc feet pounded on the hard stone floors. The moment the greenskins appeared, the Space Wolves fired upon them at point-blank range, blasting Xenos brains across the limestone walls. But more came. Huge Orcs wrestled Sons of Rust to the ground, bludgeoning them to death with massive clubs or cleaving their heads with vicious axe blows. The Space Wolves were forced to separate, taking alternate routes to split the Orc attacks and increase the chances of one group surviving to complete the objective. Morkai's detachment set up ambushes for their pursuers, cutting down mobs of boys as the greenskins rushed after them. Infiltrators laid down thick clouds of smoke, obscuring their brothers from sight, while Incursors dispatched the Orcs with ease. They advanced through armories and serf barracks, tacticae chambers, and training courts. Many warriors won great renown. Finally, the Space Wolves reached the Generatorium, a many-levelled maze of gantries, reactors, and piping. Orc mechs worked with crude tools, striking and welding in a bright haze of sparks. The Sons of Rust raced into combat. One by one the mechs were slain, though their whirring blades and crushing claws felled many Space Wolf heroes. Even as the last mechs were cut down, the Space Wolves began planting melter bombs on coolant exchange shrines, fail-safe cogitators and fuel injection fans. It was only once the final melter bomb was in place and Morkai's warriors were prepared to withdraw that they heard from the rest of their forces. Helix adepts informed Morkai that most of the Jaguar's gene seed was ruined. Morkai cursed and ordered the total withdrawal of his forces. There was nothing left to accomplish. The Sons of Morkai watched the explosion from orbit. Huge chunks of coal-black ferrocrete were thrown across Kaibal's surface. Doubtless millions of Orcs died. But this did not feel like a victory. Engria Umbershield was a bastion unto himself. Immovable, behind his storm shield he gutted orcs with countless thrusts of his blade, sending their offal slopping onto the battlements in great crimson flows. Long may his saga grow. The Storming of Lechides. Alien energies swirled over the storm-racked wasteland of Lechides. A bright green lightning fought through pollution-choked clouds. Fierce winds tore across the surface, churning up razor-sharp rocks and glass, left from apocalyptic wars long forgotten. Amidst this, the space wolves of three great companies struck the evil suns. The Iron Wolves, Sea Wolves, and Death Wolves made planetfall on Lechides' rad-drenched surface without incident. Scores of battle tanks and fast-moving swift-claw bikers churned up plumes of scorched dust as they rumbled into wedge formation. Among them bounded packs of Thunderwolf cavalry, the riders reining in their ferocious mounts as they caught the stench of sweating orc flesh and the smog pumped out by the greenskins' ragged armoured vehicles. The space wolves could see a huge and rapidly moving cloud of dust in the near distance, lit by sporadic flashes of sinister green light. Xenos intelligence had led the space wolves to Lechides. A dozen worlds had already been devastated by the immense Evil Sun's speed mob that raced across its surface. The Orcs' fury was so palpable that the War energy they generated allowed them to teleport their entire force across vast distances. At first the Inquisition thought these movements random. Only after multiple worlds had been brutally savaged could they see a pattern. With each teleport, the greenskins moved closer to one of Ghazghkull Thraka's estimated locations. They could not be allowed to reach him. As deluges of shard hail nicked and scratched their armour, the space wolves on Lechides raced to carve the Evil Sun's speed mob in two. They would pierce it as a harpoon punches into a wall's hide, and cut it apart as a frost axe severs a head from a body. The speed mob was immense. Thousands of bright red vehicles stretched beyond the horizon, all bearing the image of a red sun with a tusked maw. The orcs' cruel, bestial laughter was audible even over the deafening roar of engines. Many fired weapons into the air with glee. Squadrons of war bikes weaved between lumbering battle wagons, making rude gestures to those they sped past. Such antics were common, and the targets of their insults responded with casual shooter fire, or by swerving violently and crushing a war biker. The colossal force's advance was punctuated by explosions, as slugs met fuel lines or wagons were crushed beneath the iron treads of death rollers. All of which was met by more laughter from the whooping orcs. At the very heart of the speed mob was a giant battle fortress, bigger than a bane blade and festooned with weaponry that crackled with lightning. Around this abomination tides of energy ebbed and flowed, and the space wolves' instincts told them that it had to be destroyed, but they were hugely outnumbered. The wolf lords knew that speed would be essential to strike before the orcs could properly respond. Land raiders and repulsors made up the outside edge of the space wolves' attack. The first to fire did so as soon as they came into range of the speed mob's flank. Searing las beams shot into the outermost orc vehicles, causing them to explode in great fireballs as their fuel tanks detonated. Crashing into the wreckage, many ramshackle buggies and trucks were sent flying through the air before crunching into the ground. The space wolves' attack lost no pace. More and more of their vehicles opened fire as the wedge's flanks drew into range. Streams of heavy bolter and Gatling cannon rounds joined the barrage, ripping apart orc drivers and riders and spraying cabins and saddles with blood. Behind the protective screen of land raiders and repulsors raced lighter vehicles, bikes and thunderwalls. As the armoured wedge pierced the Ork column and drove towards its heart, the Wolf Lords let these faster units off their leash. Making full use of their manoeuvrability, they sowed chaos and confusion, breaking up anything resembling organised resistance. Iron Wolves, Predator Squadron, Frecky's Fangs cut through truck after truck with bursts of thudding autocannon fire. Meanwhile, Fenska's Longblades, Swiftclaws, whooped and hollered. The young Sea-Wolves warriors weaving between smouldering wreckage as they bathed open-topped buggies with gouts of burning promethium from their flamers. The scent of burning orc flesh sent the Thunderwolves of Athglum, Bloodmane's pack into a frenzy. And the Death Wolves' beasts leaped from warbike to warbike, savaging the orcs riding them with crushing bites that collapsed skulls and tore off muscled limbs. The attack hit the speed mob like a stone thrown into a raging river. After the initial disruption, the Greenskins recovered with terrifying speed and surged back at the Space Wolves. The Evil Sons were daring and deadly, and in frenetic armoured warfare they could hold their own. The Space Wolves accelerated into the shifting mass of greenskin vehicles, avoiding the brutish spiked hulls that bore down upon them. To the Orcs this only added to the glorious anarchy. The Iron Wolves' repulsors, Ice Fiend and Underfang, were toppled by a rampaging battle wagon whose huge wrecking ball caved in their flanks. Rotor-bladed contraptions shot down a full landspeeder squadron with a barrage of explosive rockets. Every Space Wolves driver was put to the test as they fought high-speed warfare on a battlefield littered with burning wrecks. Some enemies surging to engage them from behind while others barreled towards them head-on. The main thrust of the Space Wolves' assault still made for the energy-radiating battle fortress at the centre of the greenskin speed mob. The tempest of power emanating from it was growing larger. Several rune priests rode in the leading land raiders and repulsors, and every wolf stride they gained on the battle fortress brought them more pain, their heads pounding, as if the Orcs' false gods themselves were battering them with a hammer. Bristling with as many weapons as it could carry, the battle fortress was a monstrous assault on the eyes. Its haphazardly welded armour plates coloured a bright crimson. The machine's chassis might once have belonged to an Imperial Baneblade, although all manner of vehicles had clearly been pilfered to augment it. A dozen Orc psychers were chained to the battle fortress, spittle flying from their frothing mouths as they shouted and raved and fought against their heavy iron restraints. Fat sparks flew from their eyes, and bright light flashed around their heads. With each passing second, the forces being generated by the warring Orcs grew more powerful, and the consequences for the Space Wolves were severe. Bolts of Viridian lightning struck their battle tanks. Racked with crackling energy, the Sea Wolves' Predator Ice Bear exploded, the shrapnel shredding several Swiftclaws. The repulsor Iron Stone's gravitic field failed, its forward momentum flipping it onto its back. The embarked rune priests fared worst of all, screaming in agony before their heads were ruptured by the overwhelming psychic power spraying their vehicles' interiors with brain matter. As the Space Wolves' battle tanks thundered into range and primed their weapons, the surge of Orcish energy reached its peak. In a flash of green light, the Orcs vanished, leaving the battered Space Wolves in a desert of burning wreckage and toxic sands. All sign of their enemy gone. The Sons of Russ had failed. It's really hard to stay dramatic when they're using words like wolf stride. In a duel of empiric tempests and crackling energy blasts, Ulfwin Weirdstaff struck down a foul duo of gibbering orc witches. His fury knew no bounds, the foe feeling the might of his wrath. The chapter thanks the Allfather for his strength. The Purging of Gaivos. The Promethium refineries of Gaivos were under attack from Blood Axe Orks. Originally hired by the system's overlords to fight off other greenskins, the Xenos mercenaries had turned on their employers. When the Blood Axes beheld the riches of Voria system, they decided to take it for themselves once they had fought off their competition. After swiftly conquering most of the system's worlds, they launched an assault upon its capital planet, Gaivos. The Drake Slayers, Death Wolves and Fire Howlers made straight for Gaivos upon entering the Voria system, having heard the planet's desperate pleas for aid. The Imperial war effort in the subsector had relied heavily on Voria's resources, and the Space Wolves' primary mission was to take back Gaivos' largest Promethium refinery. Once they had secured its vital supplies, they could work to relieve the rest of the planet. The refinery itself was the size of a town, with miles of thick piping, colossal exhaust towers, and vast storage vats. Searing acid rain lashed down on the Space Marines as they approached, eroding the pale grey paint of their armour. Once inside, the Space Wolves rushed through the complex, clearing rooms and hunting for their prey. They found broken and half-eaten bodies of human refinery workers scattered around, but it was only after most of the site was secured that warriors of the Fire Howlers' great company sighted the Orks. Garbed in what looked like camouflage, and bearing symbols of paired red axes, the greenskins were retreating into the dense, polluted forests that bordered the complex. The Fire Howlers wasted little time, determined to strike before the greenskins could regroup. They charged into the trees. Their cohesion was soon broken up, however, as each squad navigated the thorny brush and acidic bogs. This was exactly what the Blood Axes had counted on. Far from chaotically retreating, they had withdrawn from the refinery to lure the Space Wolves into harsh vegetation. From well-concealed positions, mobs of boys rushed at isolated squads of Fire Howlers, choppers raised high for the kill. The Fire Howlers roared in frustration, unable to fully grapple with the foe that refused to engage in honourable combat. The Drake Slayers and Death Wolves advanced in the Fire Howlers' wake, following the trail of splintered trees, spilt blood, and the intermingled bodies of Orks and Space Wolves. Crom Dragongaze had learned valuable lessons from underestimating the Orks in the past. Though eager to race ahead and gut the Xenos scum, he instead followed behind the loping Fenrisian wolves that were sniffing out the quarry. The Space Wolves uncovered many hidden ambush points, blood claws and intercessors working in unison to cut down the concealed Orks with precision bolt rifle fire and deadly sweeps of their chainswords. It was not long before the Death Wolves and Drake Slayers heard the din of clashing blades, booming guns, guttural orc roars, and fierce Fenrisian war oaths. The Fire Howlers were surrounded, a dot of grey amid a sea of black and green. They fought back to back, fangs bared in hatred, as thousands of Orks surged upon them. Wolfguard veterans clashed with massive Orc knobs, exchanging furious blows. The Death Wolves and Drake Slayers are deployed to trap the Orks between the two Space Wolves' forces. With savage howls, they raised their weapons and opened fire. Torrents of mass reactive bolts tore into the rearmost Orks, ripping off heads and shattering spines. Hundreds were killed or wounded in the first volley, but the greenskins were quick to turn on the ambushers and charge. The Space Wolves drew their blades and rushed to meet them, the forces smashing together with a terrible crunch of armour and muscled flesh. Blood flowed as blades bit deep, Bones were broken by savage punches, kicks, and headbutts. Fenrisian wolves slashed at orcs with their claws and tore at their throats with savage bites. The firehowlers rallied at the sight of their brothers and fought all the harder. Intercessors fired into the orcs at point-blank range, pushing hard to reach their brethren's position. Wolfguard warriors, bearing storm shields, formed an implacable wall the blood axes could not penetrate and ground the orcs back. Possessed with the fury of Fenris itself, the Space Wolves crushed the remaining orcs, who were unable to capitalize on their numerical superiority in the dense vegetation. Fenrisian wolves pursued the survivors, their maws dripping with blood. But dozens of Space Wolves lay dead. As the Wolf Priests extracted the gene seed of the fallen, the Wolf Lords considered their next steps and resolved to make for the refinery, to re-embark their gunships. They would deploy to the next target at once. Much of Gaivos had still to be purged. By selfless sacrifice did Vrek Ironspear ensure that his brothers and their loyal serfs escaped an ignominious death in the depths of the Sea of Stars. May those that live draw oceans of the foe's blood in his memory. Thus does the Ironspear's saga close. Ambushed at the Narian Reef. For months the Grimbloods' great company pursued and harried an enormous orc void fleet, an armada of vessels looted from a dozen races. The Greenskins were on the warpath, heading for the shipyards of the vital Evrad system. In a last-ditch effort to halt them, the Space Wolves made their stand at the Narian Reef. The Greenskin fleet was impossible to stop. For months the Grimbloods and Imperial Navy flotillas fought it, but they appeared to be little more than irritants to the colossal conglomeration of looted vessels. These ranged from rocks, hollowed-out asteroids with gargantuan engines affixed, to hijacked Imperial battlecruisers and frigates. Some bore solar sails, the Grimbloods identified as having been taken from Eldar vessels. Others had sleek engines welded to their sides that were unmistakably Tau in origin. Whatever their adaptations, all were painted from stem to stern in blue, the favoured colour of the Deathskull's clan. Every strike the Imperial vessels made was an attempt to distract the Orks away from the vast shipyards of the Evrad system. Seizing such facilities would enable the Greenskins to construct huge fleets in a frighteningly short time. Again and again the Imperial forces tried to lure the Orks away from their prize, but to no avail. With each clash their numbers fell, while those of the Greenskins appeared to grow. Their Port Vull, an entire squadron of Imperial Navy battlecruisers, was swamped by rampaging Orks who took the ships for themselves. In the Evagzrus Nebula, the strike cruiser favoured of the Allfather, and the Gladius-class frigate Runehelm self-destructed to avoid the same fate. Even reinforcements from the Night Raptors and Dragon Spears chapters failed to lure the Orc fleet from its path at Philono's Vale. The Grimbloods and their allies were as spikenats to a great white bear. As the Deathskull's armada drew ever closer, Wolflord Jarl Grimblood declared that his forces would have to meet the Orcs head-on, fangs bared, to spare Evrad. He consulted the flames over and over again, seeing many potential outcomes of the battles to come as he searched for the course of action that would bring victory. No option was without and terrible risk that could leave dozens of systems vulnerable, but Grimblood knew that the Imperium should hold nothing back. To defeat the Orcs would take every warship and crew at their disposal. The stand would be made at the Narian Reef. Its numerous asteroids would provide vital cover for the Imperial vessels and prevent the Orcs from utilizing their huge numbers. With much argument, Grimblood secured every ship in the Evrad system. Even those that remained unfinished were tethered to functioning vessels and towed to the reef. The trap was set. When the Orks reached the Narian Reef, they found a vast debris field stretching for thousands of miles before them. Eager for the best loot, they plunged their chimeric vessels into it. Captured fuel tenders hosed cerulean pigment over swathes of wreckage, claiming them for the Death Skulls. Deeper the greenskins dived, submerging themselves in a paradise of apparently abandoned scrap. But among the field of scuppered vessels lay ships merely dormant. With incredible discipline, their crews stifled anger as their vessels were tainted with Orkish colours, and looting crews with cutting torches descended onto their hulls. They awaited the signal to strike. When the field of detritus was full of marauding greenskin craft, the battle barge Axe of Russ stirred to life, unleashing ferocious barrages into the unsuspecting Orc fleet as more Imperial ships awakened. Weapons cycled rapidly into readiness, pouring vast gouts of fire into every Orc contraption in their sights. Dozens of greenskin vessels were overwhelmed and blown to pieces by the deluge. Fireships on high-speed ramming courses tore apart kill cruiser after kill cruiser, their plasma generators set to auto-destruct. The resulting detonations sent vast hunks of metal hurtling through the debris field, severely damaging the cruiser's escorts and fragmenting what little coherence the Death Skull's fleet possessed. From nearby asteroids, dagger-like Adeptus Astartes vessels struck at the Orc rocks and other large ships that had not entered Jarl Grimblood's trap. Space wolves, dragon spears, and night raptors raced to engage the foe, macro cannons and lances flaring. The Space Marine ships launched boarding torpedoes and assault rams, looking to cripple from within those vessels they cannot destroy from without. It was crucial for the Imperial fleet to inflict as much damage as possible in the opening stages of the battle, while the element of surprise was with them. These precious moments would not last long before the Orcs began their fight back. Sure enough, the greenskins were quick to respond. Determined to capture what they had claimed as their own, the Death Skull's captains launched thousands of assault boats in retaliation, and teleporter arrays throbbed with green energy as they beamed boarding parties of leering flashkits onto enemy vessels. Some knobs, clad in void-hardened mega-armour, even had themselves flung at nearby Imperial ships from enormous hull-mounted catapults. The Axe of Russ came under direct assault, its corridors and hangars awash with murderous greenskins armoured in blue plate. The Space Wolves' heroics knew no bounds. But the Xenos numbers were telling. Though the Grimbloods slew a dozen Orcs for each of their own number that fell, it was not enough. Looters stormed through the decks, slaughtering crew members and Space Wolves alike, even as the Sons of Russ held on to priority locations and launched repeated counterattacks. Grimblood had entrusted his ship mistress with command of the fleet and the wider battle. Blades slick with gore, he vowed that he would stand firm until victory was declared. The Orc fleet had to be broken completely. For many more hours, he and his brothers made their stand, while the wider battle hung in the balance. With great cunning and skill and tenacity, the gunner Ghostwolf guided the Rockfist through broken stonework. Wisely and bravely did he use gifts of visor and auspex, and by his deeds did the Rockfist destroy countless foes. May his saga serve as an example to us all. Verger Greypelt could not believe it. Did his ears deceive him? It could not be true. "Repeat in Fenris's name," he said. "The Axe of Russ, my lord. It's gone, destroyed," said Herald of Morkai's shipmaster, Parash Mahantor. The bridge was awash with noise. Officers bellowed orders and demanded information over the thuds of heavy ordnance and the relentless binaric chatter of servitors. Vorge's fists shook with fury. Such a loss. "What are your orders, my lord?" the shipmaster continued. "The captains of the fleet ask you as Lord Grimblood's second." With each passing minute, more of the green lights on the tactical display turned red. Each marked the loss of an Imperial vessel, along with thousands of brothers. "Did you see this in the flames, old man?" Verger thought. "Situation report," he voxed. "Our casualties are heavy. Tactical situation is precarious. However, Night Raptors report successful sabotage of several rocks. Fighting continues throughout all enemy attack asteroids. We may yet claim more for the Emperor." Grimblood had stripped Avrad of all its naval assets for this final stand. The risk was immense. Nothing less than the total disintegration of the Ork fleet was acceptable. Grimblood's apparent death left this task in Verger's hands. "No battle worth winning is won easily," thought Verger. For all their casualties, the battle was not yet lost. Hope remained. "We fight on, for us and the Allfather. Destroy them all." Ankill Redhowl was struck down, a wicked blade driven through his back by a skulking Ork foe. His name lives in glory, for his achievements in life are courageous and manly. No son of Ras deserves such dishonor. May the chapter avenge him. So ends his saga. The Siege of Ghazghkull. The fortress world of Ghazghkull was the custodian of a score of agri-worlds known as the Acres of Plenty. Securing the only remotely safe passage through the warp storm surrounding the Acres, it stood as a nigh-on impregnable bastion. This fact made the challenge of conquering Ghazghkull only more appealing to the Bad Moon Orks. When the Bad Moons attacked Ghazghkull, the Imperium responded in force, knowing that countless worlds would starve if the planet fell. Hundreds of Astra Militarum regiments, scores of Adeptus Sororitas preceptories, and over a dozen Space Marine chapters were deployed, the Space Wolves among them. In Logan Grimnar's mind, this was not a simple defensive mission. It was an opportunity to make Ghazghkull an anvil upon which the hammer of the Imperium could annihilate an entire Ork war, preventing it from uniting with others and eventually with Ghazghkull. The champions of Fenris had been fighting on Ghazghkull for weeks and held the outer bulwarks of the Lannisgard bastion. They had defeated waves of Orks and were in good spirits, exchanging jests as they swung their mighty hammers and perfectly balanced axes. But such dominance was not to last. When Logan Grimnar received word that the Barbican of Saint Hermisinda had almost fallen, he ordered the champions of Fenris to redeploy. Others would take the Space Wolves placed at the Lannisgard bastion. Rushing straight into the fray from their gunships, the champions of Fenris were repeatedly enveloped in a brutal melee far more deadly than at the bastion. Hulking knobs in clanking suits of yellow mega-armor met them with gigantic power claws, wide-barreled shooters, and screeching buzzsaws. They crushed limbs, severed heads, and cut mighty warriors in two. Alongside the meganobs waddled giant metal canisters supported by piston-driven legs. The walkers fired hails of rockets into the space walls, the blunt-nosed projectiles detonating with horrific results. Meanwhile, Longfangs and Eliminators became caught in fierce ranged duels with Orks whose shoulder-mounted guns fired storms of bullets, rockets, and energy blasts, a deadly exchange that disintegrated Space Wolves and Bad Moons alike. As the ground shook beneath Logan Grimnar's feet and metallic cries of "Wah!" reverberated over the battlefield, the Great Wolf realized that his warriors could not win by brute force, not against the bipedal war engines that stomped ever closer, rumbling louder with each step. Pack tactics and wolf-like cunning would be the only way to secure victory. The Space Wolves and Orks fought, bled, and died before the barbican of St. Hermesinda, in the open field and among ruined bartizans and counterguards. Grimnar ordered his warriors to use the shattered masonry to their advantage. The Space Wolves lured looters into the close confines and ambushed them, shredding the orcs with humming lightning claws, disemboweling them with grinding chainswords, and gunning them down with bursts of bolt fire that ripped chests open and blew heads apart. The orc stompers bristled with artillery guns and huge Gatling cannons. As they approached the fighting, each weapon roared to life. Shells detonated amongst the ruins, as an inundation of bullets reduced the rubble to dust. Orcs and Space Wolves made for cover, fighting furiously to escape the indiscriminate barrage. Such was the carnage that some of Grimnar's warriors were reduced to nothing but red mist. The champions of Fenris were pinned down. Acting quickly, Logan Grimnar ordered his own vehicles forward. Even at high speed, they struggled to avoid the punishing enemy firepower. A number of land speeders exploded in terrific fireballs, the wreckage spinning into the dirt below. Predators, thundering at full throttle, were annihilated, chewed up by heavy Gatling fire. Those that survived the barrage used their speed to their advantage, drawing the stompers' attention with raking gunfire and exposing the giant walkers' flanks with swift maneuvers. Land raiders and repulsor executioners opened fire with their heavy las weaponry, the crews keeping their cool, even as enormous cannon shells exploded among them and destroyed some of their brothers. Walker after walker exploded as their metal hulls were penetrated by intense las beams. Dozens of orcs dying around them as deadly shrapnel was launched in all directions, fatally piercing the unsuspecting greenskins. When the dust finally settled, the orcs had been beaten back. The battlefield was littered with the mutilated corpses of Space Wolves and vehicle wrecks. It had been a bitter fight. The best of the greenskins pitted against the most skilled combatants of the Imperial forces. Logan Grimnar thanked Russ and the Allfather for their victory. They had held the Barbican and dealt a bitter blow to their enemy. But as the champions of Fenris regrouped, word reached the Great Wolf. The Bad Moons had breached the glacis of steel, demolished the Hecatrice crownwork, stormed the crucial Iosho bastion line, and overrun the 11th Gutgard Holdfast's regiment. Summoning transports, Logan Grimnar prepared his warriors to deploy to their next battlefronts. The war raged on. Ota the Berserker struck down the deranged orc walker. He plunged his great claw into the rusting machine's torso, brought his mighty axe down upon its metal roof and cleaved the contraption in two. May his Saga ever tell tales of his ferocity. The Cleansing of Brachytus. The Gloomtide cluster is bathed in perpetual night, its planets tidally locked to weak stars obscured by dense dust clouds. Drawn to these vulnerable worlds by the promise of flesh, hordes of bloodthirsty snake-bite orcs descended upon them, herding their peoples into slaughterhouses and befouling their cities and resources. Space Wolves of the Red Moons and Blood Moors, great companies, were en route to Gotgard to join the champions of Fenris when they paused for resupply at the world of Brachytus in the Gloomtide cluster. They found the planet engulfed in war, with greenskins rampaging across its surface, hungry for meat. Wolflords Bran Redmoor and Gunnar Redmoon agreed that they could not abandon Brachytus to this fate. The Space Wolves learned from the planet's leadership that its primary city was in terrible danger. Snakebite orcs had captured one of its foremost hydrofactorums and cut off the supply of precious water. Resolving to seize it back, the sons of Russ deployed to the surface in a swift assault craft. With this insertion complete, the grey vessels leaped into combat with the Orc fleet, striking like a wolf pack, hunting a frost mastodon. Though the snakebite ships were ramshackle even by Orc standards, battling them was no less dangerous. The Hydrofactorum was a dark and foreboding place, and the prowling space wolves were struck by its dank stench, punctuated by the pungent aroma of Orcs. Mould and rust covered every inch of wall and piping, and brightly coloured fungi sprouted from corners and ceilings. Stranger still were the bioluminescent glow squigs nailed to the iron walls at irregular intervals, their gaping maws bathing the complex in a dim red light. Human bone fragments were scattered throughout, bearing the scratches of rough knife work and the imprints of large teeth. The snakebites had been feasting. It did not take the Orcs long to sense the space wolves and close in on their position. Their natural instincts and sniffer squigs made them able hunters, easily able to detect the scent of loping wolfen, the throbbing hum of power armour, and the sloshing sound of space marines wading through half-flooded passageways. Before long, the space wolves were under attack. Mobs of weather-beaten Orcs with claws and tusks hanging around their thick necks unleashed bounding gnasher squigs. These creatures had rows of razor-sharp teeth and foul tempers, and threw themselves at the Adeptus Astartes. Some tore the limbs off space wolves with their immense jaws, while the snakebites tackled the Adeptus Astartes to the ground and hacked them to death. The Sons of Rus fought back, eager to slay every greenskin they found, as they restored the water supply. With Fenrisian war howls on their lips, they launched themselves into the fray, making for the Hydrofactorum's command and control centre. Aggressor packs purged free tunnel sections with their flame-storm gauntlets, searing them clear of greenskin and squig alike. The creatures roared in agony as they burned to death. Blood maws in curses followed in the aggressor's wake, the ferocious warriors accumulating battlefield data to determine the Space Wolves' next targets. The Bloodmaws and Red Moons were determined to take the fight to the Orcs and avoid being bogged down, but their efforts were hampered by floodwaters and collapsing gangways. Grey Hunter Pack, Ironmaw, and others grappled with dozens of Orcs while submerged up to their necks in the dirty, brackish water. Other perils were clearly manufactured by the Orcs, such as the clay pots hidden throughout the Hydrofactorum, filled with buzzing, angry squigs. While the Space Wolves spotted many of these and destroyed them with burning promethium, some broke apart, freeing ravenous creatures that chewed their way through gaps in the Space Wolves' damaged armour and bored themselves into the flesh beneath. At the same time, runt-herds goaded mobs of Gretchen towards the Sons of Rus, forcing the Space Marines to hack through hordes of the spiteful, diminutive creatures to make any kind of progress. But the Red Moons and Bloodmaws were tenacious. The unusually large size of many of the Orcs had not been lost on the Space Wolves. Yet it was only when the two Wolf Lords and their packs reached the command and control centre that they learned the cause. Crewed by several hundred servitors, when fully operational, the command facility had been ripped apart and repurposed by the Orcs. Inside, pain boys and runt-herds mixed strange fluids, fungal extracts and chemicals, brewing some kind of hideous concoction in massive vats. Thick cables carpeted the floor, throbbing as the vile liquids were pumped into the Hydrofactorum's piping. The pain boys and runt-herds were guarded by mobs of some of the largest Orcs Redmaw and the Red Moon had ever seen, their eyes glowing a menacing red as the foul brew dribbled from their huge tusked maws. The connection between the odd boys' work and the oversized monsters defending them was clear to see. Heavy Orc axes clashed with fine Fenrisian swords as the two forces hacked at each other. Ferocious Orc roars were met with savage wolf howls. Blood flowed freely, and both sides slipped in the gore as they wrestled and duelled, trampling over corpses and the thick tubes snaking across the metallic flooring. Many of the pipes burst beneath the fighters' heavy tread, spilling out deluges of foul-smelling brew. As their gigantic bodyguards were struck down one by one, the Pain Boys and Runturds joined the fray. They slashed the Space Wolves with scalpels, rent their armour with surgical saws, jabbed them with electrically charged staffs, or seized them by the neck with grabber sticks. But this was not enough. The Space Wolves' bloodlust was at its height. Though the tally of their fallen was grim indeed, the surviving Wolven, Bloodclaws, and Wolfguard overpowered the Orks in a final frenzy. It took the Iron Priests and their subordinates several days to restore any kind of function to the Hydra Factorum. It would take weeks more to cleanse it of its Xenos taint, but the Space Wolves left this task to others. The war for Bracketos continued, and the great companies were gravely needed. None envy Ragnar Stormfist, fallen to his doom as walkways collapsed beneath his mighty tread. Even as he fell, did he fire his bolter with courage at the hated Orc foe. May his Saga honour the feats of his life, not the ignominy of his end. Svan Sternhelm fired thrice into the beast before slashing his hungering chainsword across the brute's heavily muscled neck. May his Saga record many kills. And with that, we'll say goodbye to our favourite wolf boys. I tell you what, I love Space Wolves. I have a schizophrenic love-hate relationship with the Space Wolves. I fell in love with the Space Wolf stuff when I read the original Ragnar Blackmane novels, which I highly recommend. The ones by Bill King, and they got I think he got the balance right there with, like, you know, the sort of savagery of the Space Wolves in terms of their culture and stuff. With, like, you know, not everything has to be called wolf. Not everything has to have wolf attached to it. You know, it's not the wolf tank. You know, like, you don't need that on everything. You've already got wolf stuff all over your armour. You know, you don't need, you know, it just becomes a bit much after a while. Oh, God. And some of the things, it makes things really anachronistic. I don't know. Yeah, the Bill King ones are great. The ones that came after, not so good. And I really like what Dan Abnett did with that when in the Heresy, the first time the Space Wolves are introduced. It's the Prospero arc. Yeah, I think that was the first bit where they show up, and that's a really good book. Good stuff. Concentrates on the human characters a bit too much for my liking. I'd like a bit more Space Wolf action, but there we go. Another one is the Lucas the Trickster by Josh Reynolds. That is a fantastic book. If you can get a hold of that, I think it's an audiobook. Get Lucas the Trickster. Fantastic, amazing. There's a short story as well where he plays some tricks, but some very interesting. He gets some interesting stuff back on Fenris. There's old Lucas. He's a bit of a one. Anyway, I'll be back again soon. Thank you all for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this little update on where the Space Wolves were following the end of the 13th Black Crusade and the fall of Cadia and all that. I'll be back again with more stuff soon, working on some much bigger videos. We'll be continuing the Psychic Awakening until completion, and then we'll be moving on to some larger videos again, big campaigns and whatnot. So do stay tuned for that. Thank you, everybody supporting the channel. If you'd like to help, please do consider using the links below. Really appreciate it. And yeah, to everybody who does, thank you ever so much, lads. Your name's going by. You're a company of heroes. I really appreciate it. You help me a lot. And yeah, please do give the video a like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you think as well. All those things massively help the channel, and I can use all the help I can get, because times is hard. As I keep saying, I need to stop whinging. It's all right. Could be worse. I'll be back again very, very soon with more stuff. And again, yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye-bye. Terra. May the Emperor protect.